So you have to reset for the last 3 months.
10 o'clock?
Yep.
Yep.
Everybody ready to go?
It has to be in the right place, that's part of the problem. Oh, wow, that's really.
We'll go ahead and call this meeting for July 8th, 2019 to order.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to everybody that's here and also that are watching us on Facebook and live stream. Go ahead and accept the motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any conversation?
Do we have to move that line item?
We're going to do it when we do the consent, we'll do that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine and have been made available to the City Council at least 2 days in advance of the meeting. The items will be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the agenda and considered in normal sequence. We have the following tonight on our consent agenda: our City Council minutes for June 24th, 2019, a resolution approving the disbursements through July 8th, 2019, temporary liquor license for Angels Amongst Us, parade permit for Giant Celebration, a bingo permit for Sueur Rotary, a non-enclosed premise license for the Sueur Chamber of Commerce. Item G has been removed. It is now going to be item 6 Delta on our regular agenda. And line item H, which is Giant Celebration softball tournament request. Is there any discussion regarding our consent agenda? Hearing none, anybody willing to make a motion to approve our consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Public comment. Public comment provides an opportunity for the public to address the council on items that are not on the agenda. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes per person. Persons wishing to make a comment must sign up in advance of the meeting on the sheet provided and identify themselves by providing a name and address. I have a sheet with nobody that's indicated that they'd like to address City Council. Does anybody wish to address City Council tonight? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to go ahead and close the public comment portion of the meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. We now move on to our regular agenda, and the first item on the docket tonight is 6 Alpha, which is the Water System Master Plan. Administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of the City Council, before you and included in your packet is a proposal from SEH, Short, Elliott, and Hendrickson to perform a water system master plan for the city of Sueur. Staff has received 3 proposals for this. This is the lowest proposal that we've received. It was quite a range from what the proposals were, so one question that came up where there were some dates in there that were from ones that have passed already. We just wanted to make sure that SEH was on board and understood what the scope of the project was, because they were, I want to say, $20,000 under what the next closest proposal was. So we wanted to work with them. This is a new group well, they're not a new group, they're around the area, but we haven't worked with them in this capacity before. Typically we have Bolton, they do a lot of these type projects for us, so this is something we did. We took the extra time to make sure that they understood exactly what we needed to get out of this. So there's a Department of Natural Resources water supply plan completion and submissions that is required of the city. That's part of this project. Again, I think the most current report, and if anybody would like to see this report, it was completed in May of 2010. In that report, there was a capital cost outlined in the report. We've kind of taken that, modified it to what we think it is today in our capital plan, but it'll also look at future capital expenditures, and we have line items in our capital plan right now for big ticket items, like a water tower replacement, a new well, and a water treatment facility addition to what we have right now. And it's all driven by capacity and need for water in the city. So what this helps us figure out is what we need to do, and helps us plan it and determine costs for it. So one question that came up was this, we budgeted $100,000 for this item. This is obviously way under that. What we do, and the beauty of the capital improvement plan, is the funds that we don't expend, they get rolled into the next year. This is water centric, so everything is related to the water fund. And those dollars will be rolled into next year, and whatever the capital plan is that's adopted by City Council for 2020, those funds will be taken into account. It helps with rates, things like that. But we do have some major expenditures on the horizon, such as the Bow-Wright Water Tower and well siting. So, if there's any questions about the plan and what's being proposed here, I'll field any of those. But basically, what we're looking for is a motion approving the proposal from SEH for a comprehensive water supply plan and water system master plan for a total of $35,800.
Any questions for our city administrator?
I have some, thank you.
Councilmember Crowe.
Yeah, there's two areas. One, let's talk about the requirement. The state is requiring this. Apparently, we're a little bit overdue for having it in, is that correct?
Correct, yep.
And when you refer to the 2010 report, you meant the 2010 plan, I take it?
Yes, yeah, the water supply plan for 2010.
That's the last one we've had.
That's the last one we've had, correct.
Okay. The other is, how does this relate to the fact that in our audit we discovered that we seem to be losing water somewhere? In other words, our percentage is way too high for the amount we cannot account for. I'm not being real technical there, I realize, but does this in some way help that?
It's not related to that at all. Really, this is helping us plan our infrastructure needs for the future, based on what the current need is for water. So it looks at what the current gallon per minute demand is for our city, and then what our treatment gallon per minute is, and compares those and say, well, we want to size up for what we currently need, or 10 years into the future, this is what we need to do. So it doesn't necessarily address the gallons pumped versus gallons billed. You'll see in the expenditures there's been some leak study stuff going on that we've solicited for outside consulting firm to look at things throughout the city to see if there's any leaks between the water main and the curb stop. That's one thing that we can do that we're doing to help find out where that is. But I think the main culprit for this is our utility billing software, which as you are all aware, is being replaced or will be replaced this year into next year. So
one reason I asked that question was SCADA, or whatever you call it, SCADA. That system was mentioned in this report. They're going to look at that, aren't they?
yes,
Okay.
yep. So likely there will be some updates to the SCADA system to get it online with the updates that we've done for wastewater already. I don't want to get too technical, but there's software called Historian that stores this data in real time, and you have access to it through the cloud. It'll be basically getting our wells and our water tanks up to that standard. So it'll be putting all that into a plan for us and getting us a water supply plan for the city that we can then take and budget for accordingly in the future years.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I guess my question would be, is this required? Should a city choose that they have to go down the funding avenue, that a city's required to have a water plan then?
They are. So there's an infrastructure needs funding program where you have to fill this out. And one of the requirements is that you have a water supply plan in order to get any funding for these water type projects. We're hoping that because of the rates that we have, in particular with Sueur, that this infrastructure needs will be able to get some grant dollars from that for some of our larger projects. So there's potential there. I don't ever like to say, yeah, we're gonna get a grant because we do this, because that's not guaranteed, but there's potential, and that's what we have our eye on for this.
But to be clear, if we were looking at some kind of funding in the future, without this plan, we would be dead in the water.
For the main program, otherwise it would have to be 100% funded through utility rates.
Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion then for the approval of the proposal from SEH for a comprehensive water supply plan and water system master plan for a total of $35,800.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any final discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. We next move on to line item 6 Bravo, which is the wind turbine relocation resolution request. Administrator approval.
Mayor Haig, members of City Council, before you is an item that Council Member Krogman and staff member Rich Kuchera, the Public Services Director, worked on, and it was assigned to the city by MMPA because they would like to refurbish the wind turbine that is out on 112. So there's a wind turbine out on 112 south of town. It's in the middle of nowhere. It took me a while to figure out who owned it, whose it was, all that good stuff. So, but it needs, if you've driven by it recently, you'd notice that it's not turning, and it hasn't turned for some time. There's maintenance that's required. MMPA handles all the maintenance. There's no city cost for this, but during the discussion, and Council Member Krogman, feel free to chime in if there's something that I missed, but during the discussion with MMPA at the board meeting, staff was, Councilmember Krogman and myself were advocating to either not spend the money to refurbish it or move it into town so that it can be part of the member city kind of marketing plan. So the MMPA board took action to say, we'll support this, we'll fund this completely to relocate it. City staff and representation come up with an area in town that you want to move it to. We'll get, the idea is that you get city council buy-in for it, and then MMPA buy-in for it, and it's documented. There were a couple steps that weren't necessarily taken to ensure that everybody was aware where it was going, why it was going, where it was going, that type of thing. We want to make sure that the discussion is held in a public forum, and city council weighs in on these potential sites. So, driven by MMPA wanting to refurbish the turbine out there. We've reviewed sites, so I stepped in on one of the meetings that Councilmember Krogman and Mr. Kuchera were having, and they were looking at a bunch of different sites. They determined that the site that is in the packet behind the fire hall would be the best suited for this, and the idea is that MMPA will cover all of the costs for this. There will be no cost to the city of Sueur for doing any of these things. So if you look at this map, you can see a general overview of the city, where it is, and then the exact location. Right now, we're currently leasing that field out for a farm lease, but it's a year-to-year lease, so we can work around that. Very little lost revenue, about let's say $450 a year, I believe. So things that were taken into consideration for this site are zoning. Right now, it's currently zoned industrial. The future proposed is public institutional, which allows for this type of use. The industrial use, there's been a question about the noise that this turbine may make or will make. It's suitable by the zoning that it currently is, so it's an allowable use in an industrial area. So that's one question that came up. Another question that came up and that was evaluated is the fall zone needed to have something like this, and it's, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 110% of the height. So let's say it's 100 feet. It needs to be 110 feet.
Yeah, this thing's 113.
This thing's 113, so you need about 124 feet fall from anywhere, so there can't be any permanent structures. This site meets that requirement. And really, Councilmember Krogman, feel free to weigh in. You guys put in a lot of time to try to figure where this is, where this could work inside the city.
That's correct. Let me just mention a couple other, just to give you an example. First of all, you have to have 125 feet from where it's located to any exterior, any building. Okay, that's one issue. So you look at places like River Park, problem there is you're in a flood zone. Mayo Park, you're in a flood. Okay, it would be a little bit visible there, but you'd still have to get it up on a hill, and it'd be, Mayo Park would be down. Plus, it can't go there because of the flooding. The other possibility would be the wastewater facility, which technically we don't own yet, and there's really nowhere to put it there that's directly out away from a flood zone. Okay, so this is the one that Mr. Crucera and I came up with. It fits all the criteria. Jasper mentioned a couple of things. You have to be aware, whenever you have one of these things, it does make a little bit of noise. So you don't want it, like we thought about, maybe we put it up by the water tower, by the dog park. But that's an area where you hear it, quite frankly. Secondly, when you have ice storms, for example, occasionally some of the ice will collect on the blade and fall off. So you don't want, that's why you have this 110% from the length, the height of the whole thing. You have to be that far from any structure. So that's one reason. The other is one of the member cities experienced, they had theirs next to a public works building, and their city, I think their city hall, and there was some oil, hydraulic oil, that was occasionally getting on vehicles. So that's why you have these setbacks. Just to be clear, in the context of the whole big picture, there are 12 MMPA cities. That we're one of the 12. All 11 of them right now that have turbines are will get them refurbished by MMPA. The 12th member, Elk River, just recently became an active member. They've been on the board, but now they're taking power through MMPA as of last October, and they are going to get another one. They're going to get a refurbished one from somewhere else. So all the cities have them. Part of this is the image of green, of using green energy, and that's what it's about. So that's where we are. Again, it's put out there in the middle of nowhere now. I, like Jasper, had no idea who that thing belonged to. It basically is not suitable where it is. The others we thought about putting near the airport, and you can't do that because of flight zones. So we're kind of boxed. We're in that box right there, which isn't so bad. It'd still be visible, still be known. And by the way, the other thing, if I may, is our public works director did say that field he intends to use for snow. What do you call it? When you take snow off somewhere, they got a place to dump it, and that's what he's thinking of doing, because it doesn't work any longer down by the riverside. You can't even get there. So that's it.
Questions?
I've got a couple of concerns. First of all, I want to state on the record I'm a big supporter of renewable energy. I think it's a good marketing tool to have that very visible in our community. My only concern is if you look at the map up there, Calvary Cemetery's right to the north of that. And over the last 3 years, I've been a big part of Calvary Cemetery. I devote a lot of time and energy to that project there. We put in a rather large religious icon where that pad is there. I don't know if you can see that semicircle up there, if you can point at that at all, Jasper. And coming up to that from the south, right there, is a long driveway, and it's a quite striking statue we put in there. And I'm a little concerned about having that window directly behind it. I actually made a picture of it before I came here. I thought we'd pass it around a little bit, but it's quite a striking icon to have there. I'm not against putting the turbine there. I'm not advocating it, but yet I'm not boycotting it either. But I just want us to be mindful of where it goes, because as that icon you're looking at there, as you're looking at it, looking to the south, so directly behind it, you would see that wind turbine. So I guess my biggest concern is if this is something we do, I would hope it wouldn't be directly behind that crucifix. And secondly, to the last point you made, Councilman Kroger, talking about dumping the snow there, my only concern, Jasper, there is that water runoff, is that going to go into the cemetery then at the end of the year? So those are a couple of my concerns.
I can address those questions. I think a lot of these things, it's tough to find a place for something like this, obviously. One thing we could look at is possibly doing some screening or something like that. It would be fenced in, but we could look at doing some screening with trees and things like that in that area, so that, if it's a concern of council for something like this, there's already some shrubs there, it looks like, I don't know.
That's what they said.
Yeah, we could do something like that if that's a
But I mean,
concern.
where you have it there, it doesn't look like it's directly to the south of it. Is there any way it could go to the east any further? Is that as far east as it could go?
We could look at it. It could go a little further to the east. If you look at this is basically in the center of the plowing.
Mm-hmm.
We have some room to work with, as this is the closest structure,
Sure.
so it could go to the east, I believe.
That pretty much piggybacks on the question and concern that I had as well. Are we set on that particular latitude and longitude, or is there some wiggle room where it could be relocated within that particular piece of property? Because I was thinking the same concern that you had, Councilmember Kirby, and quite frankly, it seems to me that if we were to put it in like one of the corners, maybe the northeastern or the southeastern corner, maybe that might be a better spot to put it than, where it currently is planned to be put at this time. So
One consideration we have to keep in mind is the property lines. So it could move, I believe,
what's the setback?
parallel 125 feet.
125 feet.
So it could move parallel with these north and south property lines, but I don't think we have wiggle room to the north and south.
Okay.
And then the next nearest structure is the fire hall here.
I want to add one other thing, if I might. When some of these were put in years back, there was no consulting with the city councils, and it was kind of done by staff. And in some cases, they were simply put in the wrong place. And because of that, the member cities sitting on the board of MMPA said, we want the cities to tell us that they agreed to the site, so that it's very clear that the city powers, not the powers, but the people that legislate in the city have agreed to this. So it's, and we're under a little bit of a time pressure. That's not a reason to vote yes or no, but they want to get these things. They've got a contract getting out. They put out a request already. They've got to start refurbishing these, and once you start, you got to do all 12. You don't. The company just doesn't come and do one and go away for a while. They come in the area and do all 12 of these. So, actually, they're going to do 11. The other one they get will theoretically already have been refurbished.
City Attorney Scoopins.
Thank you. Hopefully I can provide a little historical perspective on this, as my office was city attorney when this went in. My understanding, and I wasn't lead on this back 15 years ago or so when it was put in, but my understanding is this was more of a ceremonial thing where every MMPA city received one of these wind turbines. As far as practicality and green energy, my understanding is this is not a real energy producer. It obviously is a nuisance. I mean, if you go up to the other cities, they put these far away from houses, businesses, apartments, anything that would be a nuisance. And I believe that's why it ended up south of town. I believe the other goal of this wind turbine was they were going to do some education with the local schools and so forth. I don't know if there's been any fall through on that. I would defer to the school district whether they brought field trips out there to teach them about green energy or community groups. I don't know of any of that were involved. I know that has not worked for a while. It's visible on that new walks, and it hasn't turned for a long time. So obviously, it's not an energy producer. It's clearly a nuisance that I guess I would caution bringing it into the city without some sort of input from the neighborhoods and the businesses around there. Councilmember Kirby's brought up one with the cemetery, and that's something that could have some blowback. This is a large item that has really no practical purpose other than advertising that we're part of MMPA and for educational purposes. So I would caution before we do that without any further studies around town and those neighborhoods. Just my 2 cents, because I know that's why it ended up out south, a few miles outside of town. If everyone's familiar, it's under construction now, the 112. But that was negotiated, I know we negotiated a lease for that, and it hasn't been kept up because it hasn't produced energy, so that's another issue.
A minor correction there, I believe the land it's on, we own now. That's what Mr. Cusero told me, that he purchased a sliver of land, it's kind of like a bulb shape of some kind. But those are all concerns I think the council has to consider. But I can tell you that there's really nowhere else for us to put it. We also looked at the school area and realized there's really nowhere over there, near the school for educational purposes. So it does produce energy. It's not that it doesn't. It's not going to supply the whole city. There's no question about that. But it's a functional unit that will be hooked up to our electrical grid within the city. It's not just something that spins around up there. It will produce some energy.
Administrator Krugel?
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make too, is that they readily will say that this isn't going to be something that has a return on investment. This is a marketing piece. It's a unified front piece for the 12 member communities. As I stated before, Councilmember Krogman and myself essentially said if it's going to continue to be out south of town, we prefer not to spend any of the MMPA dollars to refurbish it, because it doesn't serve any purpose out there regarding that core goal of being a marketing piece, a unifying piece for the MMPA. One thing too I want to make sure that everybody understands is that this would be a permitted use in this zoning area. So I want to caution using the phrase nuisance for this type of thing, because a nuisance is what somebody personally defines as it. But it will make noise. It will do that. So that's a consideration that needs to be made by city council.
Is it a requirement that we have this turbine to be a part of MMPA?
No.
It's not a requirement, no.
It's strictly a goodwill marketing piece, more or less.
And the other cities, by the way, have them centrally located where they're seen. Chaska, for example, wanted theirs. They were adamant that they wanted to keep these. Shakopee has theirs at their, what they call Energy Park, which is where their public utilities for electricity is located. Very visible piece of equipment. You can see it off of Highway 101, I believe it is. So,
That was going to be my comment. I know just from traveling in the other cities, off Highway 212, I believe Harbor may have one. We have the next up on 169, which would be very visible to show that we're part of MMPA. I don't know if there's been any inspection up there.
we did. That's what I said. It didn't
Okay.
work.
Councilmember Falcones?
I have a few questions here. First, how old is the turbine?
I want to say it's 15 years old, I believe.
Okay. How often do they have to rehab? Because it's got to be less than the 15 years. How often do they have to go back and do this?
I don't know the actual maintenance schedule, but I know it's probably between that 10 and 15 year mark. Things need to be rebuilt. So that would be my guess. Yeah.
Does the rehab include updates to it?
You mean like software, firmware, that type of update, or updating hardware?
Right.
All that.
Quiet, ways to make it quieter, ways to be able to make it so that energy that's produced by that can be used right that were made to be a park type area where you could come in and, I don't know, kids with their electric scooters could plug in and charge up, or things like that.
I don't know off the top of my head. I know that the actual turbine that they're using, that they prefer to use, is one that's not manufactured anymore. So the parts are still available, but they found that this unit is more efficient and has less maintenance than what a brand new turbine would be. So they've looked into this. They've tried to figure out what's the most cost-effective way to have this out there, because there isn't a return on investment on it. It doesn't produce. It costs more to have this up than for the energy that it produces. It does produce energy that goes into the grid, But what they're looking at is the lowest maintenance cost for something like this that still works. So I can look and see if they're updating any of the hardware, the blades or anything like that with the refurb. But what I'm guessing is that it'll be very similar to what it is right now.
I'm looking for, if we're going to be a PR situation, what else what else can be gained out of it for the community? It's electric that's being produced. What else could happen with that? And that leads me to, what would the rest of that lot look like? Does it get grassed over? Does it get fenced in? Is it supposed to have screening on it? I doubt that they're gonna continue to plow and grow on it with that in there, or are they?
They could. You can have a turbine in the middle of a field and plow around it. We don't know. We're thinking that maybe we could use, because there's the Hometown Energy solar program, you could have something like that out in that area and have it kind of be a renewable area that the school could use. To City Attorney Skubitz's point, I don't think the school has been going out to the site down there. It's open for them to use. I know other member communities have their school districts involved with it and taking measurements and looking at, different variables and seeing how much energy is produced. But I don't believe, from my conversations with the current administration at the school district, that they have that incorporated into their curriculum. We had the conversation about the Hometown Solar Project and placing that somewhere on their site. And I know that they were interested in it, but there was just too much change going on at this time for them to really roll out the Hometown Solar. But the idea would be that it would be something that would be within walking distance of the school for experiments and things like that to happen.
Hometown Solar, for everybody's information, is an MMPA program where solar panels are provided for school use, basically. It could be otherwise, but I think all but one right now, if I remember right, are using it in schools, and it's for educational purposes. So, and it produces power. No doubt about that.
Councilmember Roloff.
Yeah, so, I just have one thing. What is the timetable if we would pass this tonight? To have it moved out there?
It all depends. So the phasing of the 11 turbines with a new one, what they would do is they take one down, refurbish it, put it up in a new site, and just kind of do that. From what I understand, it would go on throughout the, I believe, end of the summer into the winter, and probably get finished up into next year, I'm guessing.
And again, keep in mind, we're part of a bigger puzzle. When you contract, the cost for how many you do varies depending on how many you're going to do. And we're part of either in or out. If we're out, then they contract for the other number. But if we're in, you can't just say, well, if it's 10 or 11, would that be okay? My understanding is it's a package that we're trying to be a part of.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Huntington.
I'd like to weigh in a little bit on this to Mr. Fadley's question. I directly call on wind turbine companies too, and the company I work for has a division, it's a wind turbine company. They've generated for about 15 years. The industry has changed considerably in the last 15 years as well. They've updated turbines to be less noisy than they were 15 years ago. Not sure what it was. I remember 15 years ago when we put that in, Larry Frost put that in, or lobbied to put that in there. That was the reason why it was in south. I remember because it was the noise at that time. And when Jasper had mentioned about the company that probably made the turbine is not in business anymore, at one time there was a lot of turnaround in that company, in that kind of business, because it was such a growing business. Some people just couldn't afford it anymore. But if that answers your question, I would assume when they do this refurbishing, because I have a company that I call on up in West Fargo that does them, refurbishing, they'll do it, the updated stuff and make it less noisy. And what they've done over the last 15 years, they've changed the pitch angle of the propeller, and that has relieved some of the noise problems in areas. But I'm also concerned the fact is, not only the cemetery, but across from Kingsway Drive is, apartment buildings as well. I'm not really, I understand this might be the only place in the sewer to have it, But I'm also concerned about that too. It is a possible nuisance to other people. If it's just for show, then I'm not really sure how to answer that question, but I guess you only can move it one way anyway, so.
Councilmember Sullivan.
So I asked the question earlier to Jasper in regards to the fire hall being immediately to the east of it, with radio communication going out of that being their central location. I guess I'm a little concerned when the response back was MMPA said it wouldn't be an issue, but we never took the opportunity to communicate with our radio operators that actually control those towers, do all the maintenance to our radios for the emergency management in the fire hall. So I guess at this point I'd have a hard time voting in favor of this until I hear back from Alpha Wireless or whoever's doing our radio towers that this isn't going to interfere with communication.
Are you referring to the 950 megahertz system?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me make a suggestion. I've made a list of the concerns that I've heard. Noise would be one. These are ones that we can solve. That's not what I'm trying to say, not solve. We can get information from MMPA.
Right.
Fencing and shrubs are not a part of that, in other words. These are MMPA level. Noise is scheduled for rehab and moving, if we were to do this, and the interference of any kind with fire station radios. With that in mind, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I would move that we table this until our next meeting. I think MMPA would like it sooner, but I think we owe it to ourselves and the community to get the proper information. So I'm moving that we table this until our next council meeting.
I would also like to add on there the educational element, what currently is the arrangement between MMPA and the school district as far as using it as an educational vehicle. Doesn't seem like we know the answer to that too, and there seems to be quite a few things that have been brought up. You've got a pretty good list right there. So that said, we have a motion to go ahead and table this to our next meeting in July 22nd, I believe that would be.
I would also like to have on there an idea as to what how the city would plan on finishing that space, or what we would be doing with it. If you're gonna put this thing there and it's supposed to be a statement, then what's Sueur's statement other than, look, it's an MMPA thing?
Administrative approval.
Yeah. If I could just clarify that, would you like staff to come up with some sort of site plan for that, and then just say, yeah, this is what we're thinking, to be able to incorporate it, yeah?
If it's going to be there, what else is it gonna be used for? What can it be used for?
Are there any other concerns anybody has that we need to get?
Have we had a second to that motion yet?
No, not yet. We have not.
We shouldn't be discussing it then.
I will second the motion.
Okay. Any other concerns or questions regarding this?
That's gonna be my request, for the second.
Okay. That said, we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor to table this to the 22nd of July meeting and have staff and Councilmember Brockman continue to do some research with MMPA, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. Now move on to 6 Charlie, which is the Kinetic Leasing Capital Lease Item Approvals. Administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, what you have in front of you is a lease item for Kinetic Lease Company. This is for the fiber line service body for the facilities service truck that was just received. The total for this is $15,098.65. What this is, there was a couple questions about this. Essentially, we buy a chassis, which means it has no box on it, and the service body fits on that truck. We should see it here probably in the next month, we hope, because it's not something that has to be manufactured at the service, not at Christeel. It's something that they purchase and install. So we should be able to see it here pretty soon. But the item has been delivered and it's being installed right now. So what we're looking for is a motion approving the submission of the payment request form to Kinetic Leasing for the service body from Christeel Truck Equipment.
Any questions or concerns? Seeing none, entertain a motion for the approval, submission of payment request form to Kinetic Leasing Incorporated for the service body from Cristeel Truck Equipment worth a total of $15,098.65.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. We now move on to line item 6 Delta, which is the Community Center Policy Approval Request. Or City Administrator Greenman.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, before you, an item that was on consent agenda. I'll put policy items like this on regular agenda moving forward, if that's the pleasure of the City Council. Essentially, what we have here is a policy that we haven't had in the past that defines some of the items that we run into when we run rec programming. They're registration and withdrawal policies. Currently, there are no policies. What these policies will do is assist staff into providing customer service to people that are participating in the rec programs. And exception requests would be handled by the full-time recreation staff, and that's the 3 members, the rec coordinator, the rec manager, and then the rec admin assistant would be able to evaluate certain circumstances that may come up that deviate from this. So they would have the authority to deviate from this. And just so everybody's aware, the deviation would be, if they come in with, for example, within 3 days where they're supposed to get 50% of their refund, and it happened that they were, sick for those other 3 days before that and couldn't come in or couldn't make contact. If the staff would have discretion to say, well, you'll get your 100% refund because you have a legit story. So the first one I'll go through is the registration policies. I'm not going to read any of these in completion. They're in the packet if there's any questions that you might have about them. But basically it just gives guidelines as far as what the registration guidelines will be for programming that we're providing. The second one would be the withdrawal. If somebody would want to withdraw from something they've already registered for, this gives guidelines to staff as far as when people can withdraw, what kind of refunds they get, how we give the refunds, things like that. So what we're looking for is for City Council to adopt this policy. It'll help staff quite a bit with these things because from what I've gathered, it's been a case-by-case, staff discretion, full staff discretion at any given time as far as what the policies were in the past. So this will help create some order at the facility. With that, I'll entertain any questions.
Okay. I have one question. Will this be posted at the community center and at the pool?
Yes.
And
All my questions.
we should probably also get it into the utility bills so that we can get it dispersed to everybody within town. Councilmember Roloff.
Yep, I just have one question, and it is in the and the question I have, it deals with the registration policies, and it talks about the program cancellations made by the community center will be sent via email. The one question I have about that, what happens if a household doesn't have that? Would they be able to call them?
Definitely. That's at the bottom. There's a phone number if you want to call. You can always call. We default to email. We require email whenever most people, I'd say 95+% people have an email that they can have access to. But yeah, default wise, they can always call in.
Okay.
And if they have special circumstances where they don't have an email,
Yeah.
we can take note of that and call them in lieu of email as well. They just have to let us know.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Jasper, is there a way, when it talks about exceptions can be made, can you just clarify those 3 positions versus saying recreation staff? And the only reason I say that is because 5 years down the road, somebody comes and looks at that and could define that as any community center employee.
Yep, and I think I like what the language that was used prior to in the PowerPoint regarding full-time recreation staff. So just our full-time employees, not the part-time office staff or the lifeguards or anybody like that. But we can clarify that it's just the full-time employees that are rec staff.
I think that answers my question.
So if we move this approval, we could add that now, the language full-time.
Correct.
Councilmember Families. You had a question?
I did, I forgot.
Anybody else have anything? Well, we probably need to go ahead and get our wording correct here before we go ahead and make any motion on this. That way we have the language all taken care of.
Can we just?
Mr. Wordsmith, you got an idea on how you want to?
Well, very simply, on the very last part, withdrawal policies, the third bullet from the bottom reads, exceptions can be made for serious illness, injury, doctor's note required, or reasons determined by, and we should just make it full-time recreation staff, just add full-time. Good point.
I remember.
Okay, Councilmember Families.
Had to do with the contact, and the simple question on that one is, wouldn't, when you sign up for these things, wouldn't it just be easiest to say, in case we have to cancel, what's the best way to get a hold of you, and have them fill it out?
Yeah, I agree. Preferred method of communication, something like that when they fill it out, that'd be good.
Okay.
Did you have something else, Councilmember Sullivan? Anybody else have anything? Okay, so what we're looking at then is we're looking for a motion for us to approve the policy for the community center program to include the statement regarding the full-time recreation staff as opposed to the way it was written previously. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. Comments, reports, and items of appreciation. City council members that attend meetings will have notes regarding the meetings pertinent to the general public interest associated with said meeting. Being prepared will help expedite this comment period. Preparation for this item is appreciated. What we're looking for now is we're going to do a round robin. We're going to start with Councilmember Huntington tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted first, before I do my bigger comments, I have 3 housekeeping things I'd like to take care of. HRA had a meeting last Wednesday. Our project for our $1.4 million project is still going forward. Our executive director has been going to classes regarding deed and another one about the grants and what we can do and what we can't do. Our next meeting is July 24th. Anybody wants to attend, it's a public thing. You're more than welcome to show up. Then MRVT is Minnesota Valley Transit. Is meeting tomorrow at 2:30 in St. Peter. That is also a public meeting. Anybody's invited to that one. Last housekeeping thing I mentioned, I want to make public an apology I have for a council member families at our last city council meeting when we discussed $400,000 EDA, all these acronyms. You addressed me in answering the questions, and I realized after the meeting, and I apologize, you're not a member of the EDA anymore, and I appreciate your answers, and what you had to say and everything else too. I just want to apologize. I had forgotten you were on EDA, so hope you accept my apology.
No worries on this end, not a problem at all.
Thank you. And lastly, I have a couple things I would like to discuss. In the meeting of June 17th, when the City Council and the Sueur Henderson School Board were discussing certain subjects, one of the subjects was mainly about housing, and the comments tonight are about that subject we had. It was discussed in LeSueur County had the 3rd largest foreclosures in the state. But as I read in the paper on June 26th, they said the LeSueur County had we were the 3rd largest evictions in the state. These terms are very, very different. And I would like the paper to re-report that fact, because I do believe those two, evictions and foreclosures, are 2 different things. Secondly, I'd like to address and respond to some comments that personally attacked a city employee, Ms. DiMaggio. The LeSueur County News on June 26th, I felt took what Ms. DiMaggio had said about 55 plus out of context. I don't recall her ever saying it'd be good for 55 plus to move out of their homes and let other people move in. But as I recall that meeting on June 17th with the school board, she had said she had heard and had seen some of the communities with people with 55 plus have decided to downsize and look at more community living where they have opportunities, more activities, and more people their own age. She never said that it'd be nice if those people would move out of their homes, then that would help us in a housing shortage. As a city, we know that many 55 plus residents, like myself, are still working, raising families, and contributing to our city. So as a member of the city council and a resident of Sueur, I would like to give my full support to Ms. DiMaggio in her efforts to bring developers and businesses to our town, and also with our existing businesses to make a better Sueur. So thank you, Samantha DiMaggio. And that's what I have there.
Thank you, Councilmember Huntington. Councilmember Roloff.
Yeah, but I just have two things. I will be attending the RPAC meeting tomorrow, and that's happening down here. It's happening down here at the Leicester City Hall at 5 o'clock. So I will be attending that, and then I will also be attending the Minnesota River Valley Transit meeting at 2:30 also tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Kirby.
I'll be real brief. This weekend I will be attending a conference up in Alexandria with the Ridgeview Medical Center and with the Ridgeview Board. We're going to be kind of discussing some of the challenges with outer Minnesota healthcare, so I'm kind of looking forward to that. That'll be Saturday and Sunday. And just to jump on top of your comments, Mark, I'm a part of that 55 and older too, and I didn't take offense to it. So I wish Sam well, and I wish her to continue the good work she's doing. So thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Sullivan.
We just gotta take a moment to thank Councilmember Olaf for taking my spot tomorrow at the transit meeting. So I'll be out of town. Murpluck was canceled last week. Gonna have a quorum. I did go to our fire commission meeting. I think it was the week before. The big news out of that is we've applied for 3 grants, and we did receive one to pay for some new washers for the turnout gear. And that was 90% paid by, if I remember correctly, if I can read my notes right, the state fire marshal's grant. So 90% of it was paid by them, and it was a $4,500 machine. So it cost us, the fire department, $400. The other 2 grants, one's a FEMA grant, and the other one is a DNR grant for DNR equipment, for wildfire equipment, and a FEMA grant for $70,000.
Do you have any status on those other 2 grants at this time?
I've not heard.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Families.
Yes, Murpluck was canceled because we didn't have a quorum. I guarantee that we will try to get through a meeting with everybody there this month. RPAC, yes, is tomorrow. I plan on being there. That's a great group. If folks can come out and watch and see how things are going with them, I encourage that. And it's obvious in this town, anybody that's driving around and going through the neighborhoods and looking around, it's obvious the amount of building construction, rehabs on homes, sprucing up, you name it. You look around and there's seems to be a lot more emphasis and pride in our neighborhoods. It's really nice to see. It's also nice to be able to drive around and not rip out the underside of your vehicle going from one place to the other. It's they're not just putting in patches. It's obvious that we have funds that we put aside in our budget to do. At least if it's going to be patched, it's going to be patched right. So good job to the city for that. That's what I got.
Thank you. Councilmember Croker.
I don't have anything, thank you.
Okay. How about our city attorney? Anything, Jen?
Not much on the city front, just still doing a lot of easements with city staff for the upcoming sidewalk projects. We're working on some helipad easements up by the hospital, and still working on the Cambria expansion, so a lot going on with city staff getting easements prepared. On a personal note, I know the council approved the Angels Amongst Us fundraiser on July 26th. I've encouraged community to get out and participate in that. Looks like they're having a concert this year. As a longtime sponsor of that organization, which raises money for scholarships for local Sueur Henderson It's always a fun event, a lot of activities for adults, young people, so I encourage everyone to get out for that and raise some money for a very good cause in the memory of two special young ladies. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Director Lawrence, anything to report on your end?
No, thank you.